And we are live. Hi, good evening, everybody. Come on in. Welcome. Good evening. We have a real treat for you tonight. I can't wait to introduce our guest. I'm going to give a couple minutes to allow other people to get in, and then we will get started.
Exciting.
Yes, very exciting. So, welcome to Level Up Live. I'm Dr. Sharita Gaskins Tillett. This is our weekly live show where we showcase the talent and contributions of women physicians both inside and outside of the exam room. And I'm so happy this evening to introduce our guest, Dr. Maiysha Clarborne. I'm going to read her bio if I can see it. So bear with me if I'm struggling. Dr. Maiysha Clarborne is an integrative physician, master coach, and trainer of neurolinguistic programming, NLP, hypnosis and timeline therapy, and founder of the Mind Remapping Company. She helps individuals achieve mindset and communication mastery by teaching them how to eliminate negative thinking, faulty beliefs, and ineffective behaviors so they can put themselves in the driver's seat of truly creating a life they design. Dr. Maisha's specialty is showing people the impact that unconscious thought and belief patterns have on the reality we create. She teaches the leaders she trains that by mastering our language, both internal and external, we ultimately put ourselves in the driver's seats of our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, therefore creating new impact for our lives and the lives of people around us. A graduate of Emory University, Dr. Maiysha completed her MD at Morehouse School of Medicine and her family medicine residency at Florida Hospital, in addition to speaking at TEDx Asheville in 2022. She is the author of The Wellness Blueprint, the co author of Conscious Anti Racism, the host of the Black Mind Garden podcast, and a member of Delta Sigma Theta Incorporated. Good evening, Dr. Maiysha.
Good evening, Dr. Sharita. It is so nice to be with you today. I'm super excited.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk to you in person. I
I
actually,
know.
Dr. Maisha and I have been Facebook friends for years now, and I don't know if you remember, but we bonded a while ago over Babyface. You
I
put an
do. I don't
engagement
think I do.
question.
I
You
don't
had
think
an
I remember
engagement
that.
question in your group asking what we were doing for the weekend, and I responded that I was going to the Babyface concert.
I
And
do
so
remember that.
yeah, so we talked about that. I sent you a little video clip from
Yes, I
from the
remember that.
concert. Yeah,
Uh,
so I'm
with a
I'm
video.
really happy to meet you virtually and happy to have you here tonight.
Well,
So
I'm
you have
appreciative of you
quite
having me.
thank you quite an extensive bio. So I'm trying to figure out where to begin, but I guess we'll kind of start at the beginning. So I believe you are family medicine trained,
Hmm.
but you don't practice. You're non-clinical at this point. So kind
Correct.
of take us through that journey from being clinical to non-clinical. Like, what was your thought process? What happened? Tell us how this went.
Sure, sure. It's interesting because if you had asked me, 10 years ago, if I thought I'd ever leave clinical medicine, I'd be like, wait, what? No, of course not.
Yeah.
And I've always sort of done things off the beaten path. Right? I was, you know, a yogi when I was in college. I learned Reiki, energy medicine before I went to medical school. So I always say I was a healer before I was a doctor. And I studied when I was in med school. I used to study like traditional Chinese medicine text, and I was just like a kind of an integrative medicine on that path from the very beginning. So I always sort of did things off the beaten path. And when I went through residency, I knew that I probably wouldn't have a traditional career. So fasting forward out of residency, I did some locums for a while, and then I decided to start my practice. Now, the truth be told is when I came out of residency, I tried to start a practice,
Okay.
but that didn't work out so well. So that was like the first like major, let's say, business failure. And when that happens, you sort of get out, dust yourself off,
Yeah.
and figure out what's the gap between what I wanted and what I hadn't done. And I spent some time studying and figured out how to start an actual practice, which I did. And what's interesting is I started my integrative medicine practice in 2007 and 2008. We know the big recession hit,
Yes.
and still grew that practice, cash-based practice. And about 5 years in, after all that hard work, about 5 years in, I started to realize there was something else. And it wasn't that I didn't like what I was doing, because I did enjoy the practice. I did enjoy integrative medicine, but it was sort of like, is that all there is? Right?
Yeah.
One to
Yeah.
one, patient to patient. Even though I would do, health fairs and I would do a little bit of speaking, but it was just like I felt like I was reaching a cap. I used to joke and say I got bored, but really, I think it was just I felt like there was something bigger in terms of impact that I could be doing. And
Sure.
truth be told, I had a lot of mentors that I was watching doing these big things. And I'm
Yeah.
like, man, how can I do that? So I started the journey with like training in neurolinguistic programming in 2013. And I had already done some coach training, some coach certification back in 2008.
So can I
Yes,
interrupt you for 1 minute?
absolutely.
Can you tell us about neurolinguistic programming? Because not everybody, maybe not everybody's familiar with that.
Sure, absolutely. So neurolinguistic programming, you'll hear me refer to it as NLP. It is a discipline that really takes a lot of the theory from like behavioral psychology, cognitive psychology, the study of linguistics, language, neuroscience principles, and puts them into practical application in our lives. So it's the way we use language, both the internal language, the self-talk, and the language that we're speaking with others to empower ourselves and the people around us. And so with neurolinguistic programming, there's the conscious use of language, then there's the rapid transformation tools, and then there's the deep unconscious mind work. And those three things together really help to elevate and transform and really help people to move past past wounds or past traumas that were holding them, past old patterns of belief that hold them back from
Okay.
being able to achieve what they want to achieve in life. So that's sort of the nutshell version.
Okay. So now that you told us what it is, keep
Mhm.
going. Tell us how you got there again.
Yeah, so I'd done some coach training, and I had some friends that did NLP. I had some friends that did hypnosis. I thought got really interested, and then in 2013, I thought, you know what, if I was already coaching my patients, and I thought, you know what, if I can use these tools, I could get deeper, better, faster results with my patients. So I added that. I'm thinking that was sort of the fix for me getting a little bit bored of the one to one, and it worked for a while. And then at some point, I said, still, there's a bigger picture,
Okay.
and that's when I started to hear these whispers about burnout.
Hmm.
And I thought to myself, man, I wonder what this is about. And as I read more about it, as I studied more about it, I thought, oh, I experienced this way back in residency. It's one of the reasons that I never took a traditional path into my career. And I thought maybe I could help doctors with this. And that was the first sort of entry point
So
on
what do
that
you
path.
what do you mean by that? That you feel that the burnout is the reason that you didn't take a traditional path.
When I was in residency, it was very early on that I figured out for myself that I wasn't built for the traditional way of practice, the 15-minute visit, the not getting to spend time with patients, the not getting to talk to them about what they did. It was just, I knew I wasn't built for that. Um, I wasn't built for corporate medicine.
Yeah.
Um, I have my own mind, the way I do things, the way I feel like it should be done. And especially having an integrative background, I wanted to sit down with patients and have 30 minutes, 45 minutes, and really get to the root cause of why their health wasn't the way it should be.
Sure.
And so, being, confined inside of that system where I'm forced to see so many patients. I mean, I graduated in 2004, so we were in residency before the 80-hour work rule came into
Yeah.
effect,
Yeah.
right? And I was, you get to this point. And you spent all this money on medical school, and you spent all this time, and then you get to this point, you're like, this is not it. This
Yeah.
is not the way I want to practice. But then you're stuck with all this debt, and you're stuck with all this time pass, and it's like, well, what do I do? So I went into a pretty significant depression in my second year of residency, and there was a time where I was, on the edge of life, like really contemplating, taking my life. And it was, I think my classmates, because they were the safe space for me to be able to reach out. And it was that point that I kind of knew, like, I can't go into medicine the traditional way, which is how I took that integrative path.
Okay.
But back then we didn't have language for this thing called
No,
burnout, right? It
no.
was just like you did the work, there was suffering involved. You understood that
Yeah.
when you went into this, like this is kind of like how
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
was,
Suck it
right?
up. Suck it up,
Suck it up,
buttercup.
suck
Right.
it up, buttercup. And I survived through that spell, that time, and I, did what I needed to do to take care of my mental well being, and and then I was like, yeah, I can't practice like this. So fast forward when I started to hear these whispers of burnout, and started to really like look at, oh, this is very familiar. And when
Mhm.
I heard the statistic that 300 to 400 doctors take their lives every
Right.
year, when I heard that statistic, that was it for me. I was like, there's no way. And that's when I decided, okay, this is it. This is the transition. This is what I need to be doing, because I can't have my colleagues, my people,
Yeah. Yeah.
suffering like I suffered that day. And I had already lost a couple of former classmates to suicide. Um, and so I was just
Yeah.
like, nah, this is the new path. That's how I transitioned.
Okay.
Hmm.
Wow. Wow. So now, tell us what you do today. You mentioned the NLP
Hmm.
and hypnosis and other
Hmm.
things. So how does that translate to where you are today?
Oh yeah, so I guess I'll tell you the rest of the story. I was just having this. I just did a live earlier today, and bear with me. I'll bring it back around about purpose,
Sure.
and how when you think you got your purpose, but then your purpose path kind of winds and goes up and down on the roller coaster, and it's not a straight path from
No.
A to Z,
No.
right? So I was like, this is it. I'm gonna coach doctors and burnout. I'm gonna help people find meaning in their careers. My people, moms in medicine, that's what I'm gonna
Yeah.
do. Women in medicine. And then I started doing the work. I did enjoy it. But then when I transitioned, docs would come to me and they would say, how did you do that? So
Mhm.
it went from me coaching around burnout to coaching around career transition, which I enjoyed. So then I was like, oh, okay, that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna help doctors find their new careers, whether it's in medicine or out of medicine, or I'm gonna help
Yeah.
them be
Yeah.
entrepreneurs, right? Then
Well, you know
when
what?
I,
But I think that's great. I think we're supposed to keep reinventing
right,
ourselves. I don't
right,
think, I think anything that's stagnant is dying. So I think it's
exactly.
great that that you're doing these things.
Right. So that's, yeah. So that I chuckle about it now because it's like, I always say, this is the path. And then I'm like, then the little thing, the birdie taps me on my shoulder, like, So then what I had trained in, by this time I had trained, become a master practitioner in neurolinguistic programming, a trainer, was utilizing these tools, and started doing more speaking around shifting of perception and mindset. And then in 2019, I got that tap on my shoulder again. Higher power was like, it's time for you to start training. And I was like, okay. And that's how I started making the transition to start the mind remapping company, do the training, the NLP hypnosis training. That's how I ended up on this path. And also because of the nature of the work in terms of communication, intelligence, emotional intelligence, I now also do work in the corporate space. So I do the corporate consulting and training in the equity and DEI space as well. So
Oh wow. So that's
mhm,
that's a lot and quite a transition. So now do you still help physicians as well? You still coach
absolutely.
physicians?
Absolutely. I still coach physicians. I actually love training physicians in this work because there's a whole difference between. I no longer do do the coaching for entrepreneurship and business because I feel like we have such amazing
Yes.
colleagues. Shout out to Dr. Una, shout out to Dr.
Yeah.
Kimmy.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's a few others that I'm missing, but I feel like there's quite a few people who can take that. I do some burnout coaching and I do personal transformation work with my docs now, but what I love more than that is to train because there's a difference between giving a man a fish or a woman a fish
Right.
and
Yeah.
teaching them to fish. And in the trainings, it really is about teaching them tools that they can, sort of reframe and coach themselves, but also it's a tool that then they can go and use with others.
Right. Right.
Hmm.
So now, so is your is part of your goal to train doctors so that they can use this with their patients as well as for themselves?
My goal is to train. So there's two groups or three groups I should say that I love training: doctors, educators,
Mm.
mental health professionals, and most of who I train are also parents. And I
Okay.
love training parents.
Yeah,
So,
I think educators, I think that's a huge one too,
hmm.
because I've always said that educators are underappreciated.
Hmm.
Our kids spend so much time under their influence,
Yeah,
that they should be better compensated and they should be better respected for their contribution to the world.
absolutely,
So
absolutely.
definitely if you're trying to teach people how to reframe their thinking,
Hmm.
to reframe their lives, so to
Yeah,
speak. That's a great place. Great,
it
great, great
really is
start.
all about empowerment. Like Um, how do I empower people to empower themselves and the people
Yeah,
around them? How do I teach them the tools that not only helps them to heal old wounds, healed, heal old past conversations or belief patterns about themselves, but also to be able to easily and flexibly navigate conversations and situations with the people around them so that the cycles of trauma stop.
yeah. Wow, that's really, really interesting. So if I, as a woman physician, if I came to you
Mhm.
and I was having really negative thoughts, as you talk about reframing your thoughts, and I know a lot of us deal with what some call imposter syndrome.
Mhm.
I know Dr. Catherine Toomer says that's not, she doesn't like that term.
Neither I, neither
Right,
I.
right, right. But you know what I mean.
Of
Like
course.
we, experience these feelings of inadequacy,
Mhm.
inferiority, or whatever.
Mhm.
What do you do? How do you use those tools to help people to reframe their thinking?
So, well, one of the things, so I, in the moment, I will reframe imposter syndrome to imposter experience,
Okay.
right? Because I'm going to make up a word. It depathologizes it.
Right. Okay. Okay. Yeah. It makes it not be a disease, not be an illness kind of thing. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. And it makes it be an experience. And if we can see it as an experience, then we know that we can change our experience. And we can change our experience by shifting our thinking if we get at the source of our thinking, right? And so a lot of times when docs or any client comes to me who is experiencing this imposter experience and we have more conversation, there's a specific tool or technique that I use called timeline therapy to help to um, get to the root of
Hmm.
that imposter experience, because oftentimes it's not new. It's something, there's an old conversation, there's an old something that one is saying to themselves, that they've been saying to themselves for a long time, that got formed back in the day. Could
Okay.
be in their early 20s, teens, childhood years, right? So we there's a process by which we look at, well, how did that come to be? how did this conversation come to be? And then we deconstruct that process, that thought process, such that they can release this experience
Okay. All
and
right.
the emotions around it.
So you said it's called timeline
Timeline
therapy?
therapy.
Okay.
Timeline therapy or
Can you tell us a
timeline
little bit
technique.
about that? So I mean, like, how long is it something that you can do in one session, or does it usually take a series of sessions to get to the root cause?
It so the way this particular technique works, we are going for the release of old negative emotions first, because a lot of our limiting beliefs and decisions about ourselves, others in the world, are rooted in very strong emotion. So what we do, and if you can imagine, if you think of, the a chain of emotion, let's say frustration, for example. When you were born, you didn't have language for what frustration is. You maybe experienced this thing. Maybe you didn't get the bottle of the breast soon enough, and so you're frustrated and you cry, and your mind sort of clocks that as an emotion, but doesn't know what that is. Then
Yeah.
you experience a similar emotion. It links it to that emotion because it's similar, and then you begin to experience similar emotions, and that forms the gestalt. So in the technique that we do, we sort of go back to that root cause. It's kind of like a regression type
Yeah.
process, and we rip that first pearl off. And when you rip the first pearl off, what do all the other pearls do? They fall away,
Okay.
right? And we do that not by having a person relive the event or relive the experience, by observing it from different perspectives and taking and seeing it from that different perspective so that it's recontextualized in
Okay.
effect, right? And that allows for the emotion to fall away. So we do that with the major negative emotions: anger, sadness, fear, hurt, guilt, and shame. And then we do it with the limiting beliefs and decisions. And that takes about 6 sessions.
Okay.
Mhm.
Very interesting work. So tell me about some of the results that you see.
Oh my. Um, so a lot of times when people get the weight of those old beliefs off their shoulders, they can achieve things that they probably wouldn't have thought. So I'll give you one example of a client of mine, and she's actually a PhD doctor, organizational psychology. And when she came to me, she wanted to start her own consulting company, and all of her thoughts were impostery, right? Like imposter,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
who's going to listen to me? Who's going to pay me? Now, this is a PhD organizational psychologist at a very prestigious. She's a professor at a very prestigious school, and her thought processes were similar to what we
Well,
might.
it's
We
kind of,
say,
as we've heard before, that only non-imposters get imposter syndrome, right? Only
right?
people who are legit actually get
Only
imposter
that's
syndrome.
right. Only the most legit, right?
Right.
And so, who's gonna pay me? I'm not good at business. I'll never get, who's gonna listen to me? So we did this process, and I'll tell you, within 6 weeks. So it was really after that, maybe third or fourth session, she was in action. Like she was like already seeing the contacts, already seeing the opportunities. And why that is because um when we are clouded by the limiting beliefs and decisions, where our vision is funneled, right? So the opportunities could be right just
Yeah.
around the corner. But because we're clouded by all of these thoughts and beliefs, we can't see them. And when we open that view, when we release that shroud, then all the things that are all the opportunities that were right there, we can actually begin to see. We can see all the pathways that could get us from A to Z, right? And so 6 weeks after we finished our session, she calls me and she says, "You never guess what happened." She landed a $250,000 consulting contract.
Wow.
Yeah, and that was 10 months ahead of what she had planned,
So
right? So
then, so it sounds like it changes the way that you show up in your
it
life.
does. It changes the way you show up. It changes and the unexpected result. right, was how she showed up in her marriage,
Ah, okay. So
right?
tell us about that.
Well, she was having some challenges setting boundaries, and it was with her kids and with her partner, and she was just exhausted, exhausted. And one of the things that came out of that was sort of unexpected was her really setting herself a schedule for her, time for her, and being able to say, no, this is mommy time. No, this is me time. Right. And that allowed her to get the sleep that she needed. She started back on her own, exercise, eating, self-care regimen. And as she was able to do that, of course, that kicked up some dust in the relationship. But what ended up happening was because of that, some things got revealed and it strengthened. It actually ended up really strengthening their marriage, her marriage. Uh, and they're, sort of better than ever now, right?
So how I'm a little confused as to how the timeline regression and making the connections led to her setting those boundaries. Did she find that in the past she hadn't set boundaries and that led to some of the thoughts and the behaviors and experiences that she'd had?
Yes. So when there was a conversation that she had with herself called "I'm not worth X,"
Okay.
right? I'm not worth spending the care. I'm not worth the time. I'm not worth the right. Or I have to do everything.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
I don't do it, it won't get done.
Or it
Or
won't get
my
done right.
right. Or my value is in the doing. Right.
Okay.
There were conversations that were like that got set up because she was taking care of her mom, who had some challenges growing up.
Okay.
And so when she was able to release that, then she could see her own worth. And that allowed her to be able to set those boundaries.
I think you make really valid points. Things that I hear a lot, and I'm sure you hear a lot too with women physicians. We joke a lot about having our capes and the S on
Mhm,
our chest. The superwoman
mhm,
thing,
mhm,
but that's actually real.
mhm,
We take on a lot of things. We
mhm,
take on obviously our careers, but also we tend to be the primary caregivers in our homes.
mhm,
When we have aging parents, often we're the primary caregivers there. Even
mhm,
if we have siblings who are not physicians, it's
mhm.
still, it's like we think we have this unlimited capacity
Right,
to keep expanding, 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 and taking on more things.
right,
And I find that when we do that, we are the ones that suffer. Like, what we cut out are the things that build us up.
right. That's right. And so it doesn't serve us to wear the S on our chest if we don't first take care of ourselves. I think that if if the superheroes have a really, really good self-care routine, then hey, so be it.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, if you can, put the S down for a minute, go get and take a nice long Epsom salt bath with some good essential oils.
Yep. Yep.
Get you a massage every now and then, get your feet rubbed, you know, have some quiet time. If you're like me, I'm an introvert. You might not know it, but I really
Yeah,
need
fellow
that quiet.
introvert over here. Yes.
Yes, right. And so at the end of the day, turn off the lights, turn off the sound, and just chillax. So, like having those structures in place, like if you have those in place, then by all means, pick the S up from time to time and utilize it.
Right, right. But it's hard to, I think a lot of times we just wait for them to happen, or we wait for there
Oh,
to be space and
hmm,
time for them. We
yes,
don't we're not intentional about our self-care.
that's right.
I've said we have an epidemic of self-neglect, actually.
Hmm.
Again, where it's like this busyness, this constant busyness is um celebrated
Yeah,
almost.
yeah,
If you're doing self-care, if you're going to get massages, and I mean, and I think massages, self-care goes way beyond, and I'm
of
sure
course, of
you
course, of
too, way
course,
beyond massages, but that's
of
just
course.
something that we're using as an example.
Exactly.
But that when people do that, sometimes you are viewed as not as the word that's coming to mind is an old word, not as thorough. I don't know if you remember that word, but just not as,
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
not as hardcore, if
Oh,
you
yeah.
will, as
Right. Right.
as other people.
As
Like
other
you're,
people, right.
maybe you're a wimp or
Yeah.
or, or whatever.
Yeah. I got it. Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right about that. The other thing I think though is that I see a lot of is this space of being at the effect of life,
Hmm.
right? So like I can't because and the whenever you use the word because you're automatically putting yourself at the effect of and I think there are some there are circumstances and life happens, so I'm not discounting
Yeah.
that, right? There are some extenuating circumstances and there are life happens, but the place to stand is sort of being at the source of being in the driver's seat.
Yes.
So if you have when I used to coach around burnout, and I will say that I really enjoyed this because the burnout coaching, just because I could listen to a fellow colleague and hear where they weren't leveraging time. And so we would I call it steal time back.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that was only by putting them at the source of that stealing of the time back. What conversations do you need to have with a partner? What with your kids even,
Yeah.
right? So like the thing I talk about my relationship with my boy all the time.
Yes.
Um, when he was 4, because I'm a single mom and I no longer have family in town. And so, I'm building my mom community. I do these 7-day trainings, which go through the weekends. And so, I've got to like figure out how to manage this.
Yeah.
So anyway, my son was 4. He was making his own lunch because I got tired of getting up in the morning and making the breakfast and making the lunch and trying to do my stuff and and rushing out the door. So I taught him how to make his lunch.
So
And
he's
then
empowered.
yes, he knows what to do. Now he's like, you don't have to tell me what to
It's
do.
self-sufficient. Right. Right.
Self right. He makes his breakfast. He's learning how to, he can make scrambled eggs. He can
How
make
old is he now?
he's 8. He just turned
Okay.
8 last
Okay.
Sunday. Yeah. So,
That's wonderful.
he helps me with dinner sometimes. I've empowered him. But that was a self-care move for me
Yeah.
to empower him,
So you
right?
talked about having conversations with other people, significant others and children and family and maybe, coworkers and whomever. But I think you also have to have conversations with yourself.
Oh, absolutely. You have to be willing um for number one, accept help,
Yeah.
right? Be willing to be at the source of your own beliefs and values and thoughts and deal with those so that it empowers you to be able to reach out to the people and build the community that can support you in whatever way that needs to happen.
Yeah, yeah, and it's actually, I hadn't planned to talk about the my retreat. I
Okay.
have an upcoming retreat. I don't know if you saw that in
Yeah.
March, and it's
Mm-hmm.
called A Weekend for Me. And really, the
Mm.
whole premise is for women physicians to take time that's just for them, so
Mm-hmm.
that they can sit down and actually look at their lives in a critical, well, not so much even a critical way, but just an honest way. Just
Right.
have an opportunity to look and say, okay, how am I spending my time? What
Mm-hmm.
are my current priorities? You
Mm-hmm.
know, and am I spending my time on the things that matter to me?
Yes.
And so for me, I found that in the past, I wasn't spending time on the things that mattered to me. I
Mm-hmm.
was being led around by my life. My life was telling me
Yes.
what I
Mm-hmm.
needed to, well, you got to do this, you got to do that, all the have tos
Right.
were in my life. I
That's
wasn't
right.
running my life. The have tos were running my life.
Mm-hmm.
And, you mentioned way back in the beginning about um, feeling like you're in a box, with
Yeah.
medicine, that you have to have this job and you have to work
Mhm.
this way because you have to make this money because you got to pay
Mhm.
these loans. And
Mhm.
how else are you going to pay these loans, right? So,
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
I identify with a lot of that. But that's what that retreat really is about. It's about taking time for you to be able to look at your life and begin to have those conversations with yourself
Yeah.
so that you can show up differently in your life so that you can become empowered to change things.
Yeah. And the thing about it is, we are often trying to do things so much on our own.
Yeah,
Because there's a mindset around that. There's
right.
a generational conversation, there's a cultural conversation, there's an industry
Yeah,
conversation about it. And and so I love that you're having this retreat because, you know, sometimes we argue for our limitations.
yeah, yeah,
And we got to and we have to like have those honest conversations, like what are the limitations that I'm arguing for, and then how can I now shift my thinking to argue for the possibility.
right, right.
And when you start arguing for the possibility, then you start being willing to talk to the people that you need to talk to in your life.
But I think a part of that too is even just coming to the recognition that you have control.
Hmm.
That we've relinquished control, but we
Yeah.
actually have control. I mean, even minor things I found, like my dishwasher, for instance.
Hmm.
Um, I had this thing where I didn't think I could run the dishwasher if it wasn't full.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So if it wasn't full and we were out of silverware, which we run out of silverware before we run out of other things, then
Right.
I'm washing silverware by hand and I'm upset because I'm washing silverware by hand. And
Hmm.
I said to myself one day, who said you can't run the dishwasher half full? Who made
Right.
that rule, right?
Who
If
made
this
that
is like
rule?
some kind of crazy unconscious rule
Hmm.
imposition that I put on myself that
Hmm.
made life more challenging, when we just have to take the brakes off, so to speak.
I love there was something just so crisp in there that you said, who made that rule? We make the rules, but we forget that we make the
Yeah.
rules. We
Yeah.
often forget that we make the rules, right? And when we can really get that we make the rules, we're at choice all
Yeah.
the time. People say, well, I don't have a choice. Yes, you
Yeah, you
do.
do. Right. Yeah.
Now, the consequences of the choice or the outcome of the choice may lead you down a path you weren't prepared for or you're nervous about, right?
Yeah.
But if you want to make a choice that's going to lead you down that path, then basically all you just need to expand your resources,
Right.
your internal resources and your external resources like community and support and
Right.
coaches and retreats and things of that
Yeah.
nature.
Yeah. What's that?
So,
The
yeah,
African proverb, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you
you
want to
want to
go
go
far,
far,
go
go
together.
together. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So
Absolutely.
yeah. So it's a hard lesson that I've learned, I will say, being in integrative medicine early on before it was popular, especially in the South here in Georgia, I was very isolated in my career for a very long time. And it wasn't until probably when I transitioned that I really started getting reconnected to the physician community. I had gotten connected to my local community before then, but like really just, and I'm
Yeah.
so grateful, to be a part of these various, especially the Mocha Doc
Yeah.
community,
Me too.
the,
Me
the
too.
mom communities, it's just a, a blessing.
Yeah. For all of the drawbacks of social media, that certainly has not been one of them. It
Right.
has been a huge
I
blessing
love
and a
them.
huge game changer, for a lot of us. And even
Mhm.
like platforms like this, I try to use this particular platform to show women physicians all the possibilities,
Yeah.
that you can do and be anything you decide that,
Yeah.
but you get to choose.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And the thing is, you get to choose, and in order for something to happen, you have to choose. And not choosing is a choice.
yeah.
Not choosing is a choice.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I
Mhm.
have thoroughly enjoyed this discussion. Tell us how we can work with you. If someone's interested in working with you, how can they find you?
Yes. So if you are, whether you're interested in learning more about the training, which by the way, It is a coach certification. So there are certifications involved. So 4 certifications: NLP, hypnosis, timeline therapy, and coaching. So if you think you want to be a coach, this is a coach certification. I do them 4 times a year. I have one coming up in November, January, and April. If you want to learn more about that, um, you can go to mindremappingacademy.com, mindremappingacademy.com. And of course, that same website, we'll find where you could work if you want more of the personal transformation, the personal coaching. You will find information on that same website. You can book a discovery call with me, and we can talk through which pathway would be the best for you.
Okay. Now, I'd like to end on this question. If there's one bit of advice that you could give to your fellow female physicians who are looking to up-level their lives, what would that piece of advice be?
I always say start with the deep work, because it's so much easier when you get rid of the 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 quicksand.
Hmm.
When you start to like remove some of the internal obstacles. It's the difference between, walking in sand and walking on pavement in shoes.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
It decreases the resistance. And so start to do the internal work, and as you do the external work, and take action, because a lot of times we stay in our head and we can get in
Yes.
that analysis paralysis, and just don't do the work alone. Always find someone to do the work with, even if it's like just an accountability partner or a committed listener.
So, okay, so you mentioned, yeah, I said I was ending, but I do have a question. So,
Sure.
if you're wanting to do the deep work, but you're not ready to have a coach or a therapist, you said an accountability partner. What resources are out there for people who are looking to begin deep work on their own?
That's
Or
a
like,
that's an interesting it's
with
an interesting question, because
accountability. You said an accountability partner, but that means you're not working with a professional
yeah,
necessarily.
so I'm glad that you brought it up in that way. So you can start the work I think when you start to get into the deep work, you probably should be working with someone else, be it a
Okay.
therapist or or a coach, someone who is trained in the work.
Yes.
But you can start doing the internal work. That's the word that I should
Okay.
have used. Thank
Okay.
you for catching that. The internal work. You can start to do the internal work. If you can go to events, you can listen to podcasts, you can read books, and that starts the journey of the internal work. But once you start to want to get into the deep work, you want to do that with someone,
Okay.
for
All right.
sure.
Well, it has been a pleasure and a delight. Thank you so much for joining us. You guys check out Dr. Maiysha. She is the real deal. Um, Thank you for joining us, and we will see you next week on Level Up Live. I have a real treat for you guys next week. I will be broadcasting from Jamaica,
Ooh, sounds fun.
where
Sounds
I will
fun.
be celebrating my 50th birthday.
Ooh,
So,
sounds
yeah,
even more
yep,
fun.
yep, yep.
Okay,
So,
Stella.
we'll see you there next
All
week.
right. Thank you so
Take care.
much for having me.
Thank you for coming.